Hello fellow Canadians and Canadian whiskey enthusiasts from all over the world. Welcome to Whiskey Whistle. I'm your host Mark, and this is whiskey review number 146, I think. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yes, 146. We are going to one of Canada's, I guess, one of the best known brands. It's known as Wiser's. This comes from a company called Corby Wine and Spirits, formerly known as simply Corby. Corby, in fact, is 46%, I believe, 46% owned by Pernod Ricard, so the same company that brings you Glenlivet and Chivas and Royal Salute and quite a few other very excellent, not only Scotch whiskies, but also vodkas, do they have bourbon? I'm sure they must have a bourbon brand in there. Anyway, so this is my first Wiser's. In fact, I don't even think I've ever had Wiser's before. This little sample of JP Wiser's Legacy, which is 45% ABV, this comes from a very good friend of mine. And well, his name is George Kalnecki. So George, also known as El Polaco on Twitter, please follow him. He has given me a box full of Canadian whiskey. In fact, it was last summer. So why have I waited this long? I've waited this long for a couple of reasons. First of all, I really wanted to get to it, but I wanted to do them all together. And I didn't have time to do them all together September to December. Now I do. The second reason is that as my channel, this Whiskey Whistle channel on YouTube here, is just in its, let's say, early adolescence, I wanted to wait until I had enough of a base of viewers, a viewer base, that reviewing Canadian whiskeys that are relatively unknown outside of Canada would make sense. And I guess that's about now. Anyway, now unfortunately this label, excuse me, was mangled by my dog Rocky. He's been on the channel before on a show. He held this little bottle hostage in his little abode in our house for a period of time. Thankfully, he couldn't get into the probably child-proof, at least dog-proof lid, so that was good. Now, I'm going to pour that one, and we'll talk a little bit about Wiser's. And isn't this cool? It's actually sealed, just like a professional grade bottle of mini bottle of whiskey. Okay, into the Glencairn glass. I don't have my Canadian Glencairns at home in Canada, so this one will have to do. And I think that's probably enough. Oh, smell that rye. Very interesting. Yeah, I think that was enough. All right, first of all, a little history of the maker, Corby Spirit and Wine. And I'm going to read this just directly from Wikipedia. Corby Spirit and Wine Limited is a Canadian alcohol manufacturing and distribution company. It was founded in 1859, long time ago, in Corbyville, Ontario. As of 2008, the company is 46% owned by Pernod Ricard SA. The company distills several Canadian specialties as well as marketing Pernod Ricard's products in Canada. And there's a little walkthrough of the history. Sold in 1905, sold to Mortimer Davis. 1918, Canadian Industrial Alcohol Company Limited. 1935, Hiram Walker / Guderam and Worts Limited acquires 51% share. They wins the right to produce United Rum Merchants of London Lamb's Rum in Canada. They buy a stake in Tia Maria. They changed the name to Corby Distilleries Limited. 78. Meagher's Distillery Limited. They purchased that. 85. The company's parent is purchased by Allied Lions PLC. They divest themselves and purchased McGuinness Distilling Company from Hublain and the Spirits Division of Nabisco Brands. Yada yada yada. And 2005, Corby's parent company is purchased by Pernod Ricard of France. And they sell their stake of Tia Maria to them, and they purchase the international rights to Lamb's Rum. 2013, Corby changes its name to Corby Spirit and Wine Limited. There we go. Not much of a in-depth history, and I'm going to go look at perhaps one of the best Canadian whiskey blogs around, and that is run by Davin de Kergamo. Well, let me just go talk about this a little bit. Wiser's are without doubt some of the finest whiskeys made anywhere. Does it matter that Wiser's is now on its third distillery? Not at all. This is Canada, and as long as the distillers remain true to their recipes and distilling practices, great whiskey can be made in any number of distilleries. And I've heard this before. According to him and others, yes, there is something that happens in the still itself, and every still is different. And that's certainly true for pot stills. I think it's less true for column stills, and Wiser's would use some column stills as well as some pot stills. But I think that, as it was said, the recipe is important, the grain is important, the water source is important, the vessel of maturation is important, the length of maturation, the blending, the marriage, the marrying, mixing the different blends together, mixing the different whiskeys together. Anyway, now what I'm smelling here, this reminds me a lot of Lot 40, and it's the same company, so that makes sense. And I think this is actually higher ABV than Lot 40, if memory serves correct. I think Lot 40 is something like 44.4% or some funny number like that. Oh, very rye heavy. I don't smell a lot of corn whiskey in there. I'll tell you a little more about Wiser's legacy. So, also from Davin de Kergamo's website, CanadianWhisky.org. Let's see. The fittingly named Wiser's legacy stands as a testament to the quality of early Canadian whiskey and to the pioneer distiller whose influence was fundamental in establishing the Canadian whiskey style. And the style, well, to begin with, much of the whiskey in legacy is distilled in traditional copper pot still from a mash rich in rye grain, and that's what I smell here. The white oak barrels used to mature legacy are toasted, not charred, so that's interesting. Toasted, not charred, creating a most amazing range of typical rye spices. Legacy is the clear leader of the Wiser's range, and despite the fact that it is a relatively recent release, it has already begun to garner awards and accolades. Although the physical evidence of his distillery is long gone, 100 years after his death, J.P. Wiser can rest in peace as his most important legacies remain in caring hands. His approach to making whiskey and this release, Legacy. I'm not going to read the tasting notes. Does he mention the mash? Not a lot mentioned here. I'm sure that is available online, and I'm not going to mention it. Maybe I'll put that in the description instead, okay? All right, that's had enough time. Let's talk about the nose. We'll have a very short advertisement right here. Welcome back, J.P. Weiser's Legacy. This is fruity. It's got rye spices up the yin-yang. It's very bright, it's very crisp. It's making my mouth water. So I'm thinking about very crisp, almost unripe grapes, along with the grape skins, including that white dust that you get on grapes, which is not pesticide, that is yeast, in fact. Something like if you were to go into the forest after a good rain, and you get all of that, especially a Canadian forest, you get all of the pine, all of the earth, the grass, even some of the bark, and just all of that kind of mixing together. Very interesting. And fruit-wise, fresh plums, unripe blueberries. I keep coming back to grapes here again, these unripe grapes. And not just the grapes, also the grape stems. So after you've plucked the grapes off, you've got that little end there. Give those a whiff. You've got a little bit of a woody content. It's not quite caraway. I guess it's that rye kernel, or even like a winter wheat. I've had that before in honey. And there's something floral here as well. Baby's breath is the best I can describe that as. Compared to sweetness, this is more floral, more earthy. Again, very unripe fruit skins. Really smells nice. I really want to make this into some sort of a mixed drink. I think it would do very well. All right, on to the palate. Cheers, everyone, and a big cheers to Davin de Cargamo. Cheers to you. I'm looking forward at someday down the road to meeting you. On to the palate. Buttery, as you want a Canadian whiskey to be. Buttered rye bread. Crab apples. Freshly opened bag of raisins. Frozen blueberries from Costco. It's very dry. I can feel that on my teeth. And yet there's this big sweetness to it too. A very, very long finish also. It really carries. It's warm, it's spicy, it's sweet. A little bit of this buttered toast, maybe with some kind of a fresh apple compote. Concord grapes with the seeds, all mashed up. Oh, really potent finish. It really just sort of, it hits, as soon as you swallow it, you get this big crescendo. And then a very gentle release. And it carries, and it carries, and it carries. Oh, George, what have you done? Again, Twitter, El Polaco. Please have a look. ELPOLAKO. Follow him. One of the most gentlemanly of men. A real Canadian. With Polish origins, as I have. My grandfather was Polish. My grandmother was Polish, of Polish descent. My grandmother of Ukraine descent. My father was born in Denmark. All right, with a little bit of water, let's see what happens here. We'll have another short little advertisement right here. Welcome back. This is J.P. Weiser's Legacy with a little bit of water added. Not very much. Now, age-wise, this is a non-age stated Canadian whiskey. I'd say this is in the ballpark of lot 40, maybe a bit older, in fact. Perhaps 8 years, thereabouts. Maybe 9, maybe 10, maybe a good mix. There might be much older Weisers in there. I'm going to add just a dash more. I have a feeling that I'm going to get some very rich fruits coming through here with water. This reminds me in some way a lot of a particular bourbon that goes by the moniker 101, which will go unmentioned. Yeah, and you really do get some development here of much riper fruits than on the nose neat. Ripe apples, ripe grapes now. Still very rye heavy, but it's really toned down that crisp rye spiciness. And it's given way to a very, very nice, grainy rye bread. Somewhere between the straight rye and the rye bread, with these riper fruits happening. It's really lovely to smell. All right, onto the palate. Cheers. A much thicker mouthfeel now with water. Something's happened there. Much more jammy, as I would have expected, given that what I mentioned about 101. Apple jam, a little bit of blueberry. I keep thinking of blueberry here. Maybe also Saskatoon berry, especially slightly baked Saskatoon berries that have that reaction that happens in the seed that gives it that bit of nuttiness. Apple, Saskatoon, blueberry, wild blueberry. This is very nice. Now I know that I noticed, as a first language native English speaker, words, even if you just look in the direction, they jump out at you. He mentions prune juice. I can see that now. But I don't drink prune juice on a regular basis because I'm regular. So That's not something that I think of as a tasting note often enough. Although he does mention generic ripe black fruits, so maybe the Saskatoon and the blueberry would fit in there. And that's an interesting thing that I never mention. Oh, nice! Right to the end, it's really, really good. Davin likes to talk about the smell of the glass after it's dried off and kind of everything has left. All the alcohol content is gone. All that's left is just some hint of what was in there. Anyway, he mentions here empty glass. The morning after glass is very expressive with hints of dry wood, burnt wood, mint, and rye spices complementing the fruitiness. Anyway, you can check out his review on CanadianWhiskey.org. So what kind of a score can I give this one? Well, I mean, keep in mind, that's the first time I've had Wiser's and my first 25 milliliters. I'd love to spend more time with that. I think I'm going to go with 88 out of 100. That's the WhiskyWhistle whiskey score for J.P. Wiser's Legacy. Really lovely to drink. There is nothing amiss there whatsoever. It'd be interesting if the same content had an age statement, although I'm going to try that. I'm going to try the 18. We'll see how that is. The Wiser's 18, and I'll be able to compare them. I'll be able to compare with what's left here. And I've got a third Wiser's, the Red Letter 2014 release, again from George. So a big thank you to George, and thank you for watching. I'm going to put a link to some other Canadian whiskeys that I've tried. Lot 40 will be up here. There will be a different brand right there. And if you haven't subscribed to WhiskyWhistle, please click the link right there, okay? Thanks for tuning in, and we will see you for 147 very soon.